my name's Sue Backhouse, and I'm the Director of Research in the Carnegie School of Sport at Leeds Beckett University. It's my pleasure to be taking part in this virtual conference today to share with you the idea of the dopogenic environment and consider how its existence therefore encourages the use of imogen performance enhancing drugs. And in taking those ideas forward, consider what that means in the way that we act to prevent the potential harms associated with IPED use. And it's in considering the potential harms that the importance of recognizing the dopogenic environment is highlighted. In that sense, there is a growing evidence base of the harms associated with IPED use, giving rise to a growing recognition of the population health effects of such use. IPED use is a behaviour, and we know that human behaviour is incredibly complex. And drug use behaviour are socially situated behaviours. And recognising the complexity and the interactive nature of human behaviour, we can start to consider what a simple behavioural map might look like in the sense of IPED use. And in particular, the use of anabolic androgenic steroids. So steroids are the most commonly reported IPED in terms of general society, and also in terms of some of the sporting research we've seen, has impacts on our physiology and our musculature and the gains in strength that it can generate. So if we take an approach of looking at anabolic steroid use as target behaviour, we can start with a simple behavioural map to think about who are the influential agents around that target user, in this case Phil, who's the user of steroids, and then what are the influencing behaviours potentially around Phil in terms of his decision to use anabolic steroids. So we can start by giving an example of an influencing behaviour of Phil actually going to the gym. So entering the gym environment where he then meets Jeff, who's his friend, and Jeff, who's in that gym environment, has been using steroids for quite a number of years. And as a consequence of his steroid use and his training combined, he has shown some incredibly impressive results as Phil sees them in terms of his gym performance. So he's lifting heavier weights, his recovery is much quicker, and Phil is able to observe those changes in Jeff. If we then look to Instagram, and Phil follows a guy called Harry. Harry's very regularly posting on Instagram, sharing lots of imagery of himself in the gym, lifting weights, and also he advocates very strongly for certain types of steroid and how that has helped him achieve his goals and the various pursuits of goals that he's put forward. Also alongside Phil, we've then got Carl, who's Phil's strength coach. Carl is very well networked and connected, and actually he is the source of supply for Phil's anabolic steroid use. So he supplies that through the gym environment and actually supplies a number of friends who are kind of situated around Phil. So this diagram, just a very simple behavioural map, starts to impress upon us the importance of recognising the human behaviour of using steroids is very much a networked behaviour, and it's not a behaviour that exists within a vacuum. So if we take that into account and have that as the basis for the conversation today, it's therefore important to draw on some theoretical frameworks to help us understand human behaviour. And the framework that we've been applying in a lot of our research in recent times is the capability, opportunity and motivation model of behaviour, which is led from the work of Susan Mickey and teams at UCL. And what we see from the COM-B model, which is the image on your slide, is you can see that essentially behaviour is a function of three interacting conditions. So Phil needs to have the capability to enact that behaviour, and the capability in this sense is both physical and psychological. So physical capability could very well be injecting technique, and psychological capability would then be around knowledge and understanding of various cycles and strategies for use. On the flip side, it could also be knowledge and understanding of the risks and harms associated with various IPED use. Motivation is the next phase of those interacting conditions. And here what we're talking about is both reflexive and automatic motivation. So reflective motivation is very much thinking about the beliefs about the consequences of using steroids. And if individuals have a very firm belief that that will lead to the pursuit of their goals and they'll be successful and able to achieve their goals through that use, then there's a motivating element to it there. But there's also an automatic element to motivation, and that can come from the research that we are increasingly seeing around the effective responses to steroid use. And that can create habitual behaviours, and certainly the evidence base is mounting on the potential habituation and addiction to various IPED drugs. Then also the other interacting condition for behaviour is the sense of opportunity. And opportunity can be broken down into physical opportunity, and that can be the resources and the settings that are available to us. If we talk about resources within this context, it could well be the needle and syringe programs that are available. And also then the social opportunity, that's the social norms and conditions that reinforce the behaviour. So the social influence is an important part of that aspect of interacting factors leading to behaviour. So taking those all together, it's actually the physical and social environment and opportunity that we're interested in focusing on today. So if we take the aspect of the theory of human behaviour, the COM-B, it's important to recognise that COM-B, there are multiple COM-Bs within the systems. And here in front of you is the social ecological model, which colleagues have started to apply to IPED use and steroid use in particular through the work of Jeff Bates and colleagues. But here I'm interested again in not necessarily the individual level, and that doesn't discount the fact that we've got a growing evidence base around individual capability, opportunity, and motivation. But what we're interested in today is the element of the physical and social opportunity and how that sits at the level of social networks, the social environment, at the level of physical environments or settings. So that includes schools, workplaces, gyms, prison settings. And then at the next level above, that's the level of the sector. So, for example, the conditions around the IPED industry, looking at the governance and government rules and regulations, but also societal and cultural norms and values. So we can see, therefore, there are multiple layers of influence that can lead to behaviour. And it's at the level, essentially, of the physical and social opportunity that the concept of the dopogenic environment is drawing from. And with the dopogenic environment, what that term means is the recognition that the environment itself is capable of producing and generating behaviour. And that comes down to the fact that we sometimes ignore the aspect of the environment that is influential in our behaviour. And a lot of our focus and attention goes around individuals and their choices, and essentially individual agency and responsibility, and not seeing the bigger picture of the influences around those individuals when they come to make the choices that they do. So we did call for action to be taken on the dopogenic environment to try and shift the blame and stigma and focus away from individuals and recognise the role that the environment plays, as I say, in decision making. So I'd like to take you through some ideas then of bringing that dopogenic environment to life. You know, what does it look like? And I'll draw upon some evidence around sectors and settings in particular to illustrate how the environment is capable of generating and producing IPED using behaviours. So let's take a look at the gym as a setting for being an enabler of IPED use. And in the gym, here's an example of a quote from an adolescent boy that we spoke to in some research we did for the Rugby Football Union. And what you can see here in this quote is the articulation that the first time I got the opportunity to use anabolic steroids was when I first started going to the gym. this participant had been 4 or 5 times where that opportunity to buy some had manifested. Therefore, consequently, they just discussed that decision with people that they knew in the gym and that knew an awful lot about it, and that they said it can be really bad for you. So that social network at that point, to some extent, put off this participant. They were taking Dianabol, and shortly after he said he'd started taking that, he noticed the effects. So for this participant, that put him off. But it was the gym environment where that opportunity, so coming back to the model of behaviour, where the actual opportunity for the use of steroids was brought forward. If we look at the school setting, and we've done some research with, as I say, with adolescent males in particular, and within that school setting of over 700 participants that we interviewed, that we undertook a survey with and then follow-up interviews, what came through within that was a concern around the use of banned substances. And we did give the example of anabolic steroid being a banned substance in terms of competitive sport, that the teachers and the schoolboys themselves, over 40% indicated that they thought it was a serious issue in schools that needed to be addressed. So that was 58% of schoolboys, and 46% of teachers agreed that it was a serious issue. And we started to unpick a little bit more about that school setting in the research that we did. And what is probably worth noting today is, again, thinking then about the networks and how they interact with the settings. We had reports from the schoolboys of the teachers and coaches within those settings actually supplying children, essentially, because some of these were 16-year-olds, with the use of supplements. Now, supplements are not, by their nature, prohibited in sport or in society, but we are aware that supplements are not without risk. I will come on to that a little bit, but there is a risk of contamination and adulteration. But also, we're seeing research point to a potential gateway between supplement use and prohibited substance use over time. What we therefore found, the supply, in particular protein supplements within the schools, here is a normalization of such use within a school setting. And really within that school setting, we want to try and prevent and delay potentially the onset of supplement use, so that a food first approach is much more emphasized and supported and endorsed by those influential agents as teachers, because we also noted that the vast majority of those we surveyed were keen to do what teachers and coaches kind of suggested to them. So that influence is key. But the school setting is therefore important. And it's also important when recognising that from those participants we surveyed, 3 out of 5 had never received any formal education on supplement use or banned substance use. So if we come back to the theory of behaviour and recognise that capability and knowledge in particular is an important determinant of behaviour, then we've got potentially some very vulnerable people within that school setting who are not aware of the risks of say supplement use in particular, not aware of the risk minimization process that's important for supplement choice decision making, and the potential that they can contain prohibited substances within those supplements. So important findings to know and to consider how we then act on those findings, in this case within the English school system. Beyond the school setting, there is research that has been identifying the setting of the prison as a space and a place where IPED use can be encouraged. And so therefore, outside the competitive athletics arena, there are other settings of importance. And the work of Dominic has highlighted the prison setting as a particularly important one. And if we then move beyond the prison setting to acknowledging the role of neighbourhoods and communities in IPED using behaviour, we've got research from Van Houten Keene that's highlighted within British South Asian communities the role of community in influencing IPED use behaviour. If we then come back to the settings around where we are exposed to those substances, and taking into account the risks I've highlighted around supplements, the retail and service industries and establishments that we frequent also become a point of choice. So reiterating the kind of statement around choice happens both home and away. In those retail environments, we are bombarded with choice. And this is a photograph that I took from our local petrol station. This is a couple of miles away from where I'm sat talking to you today. And in that petrol station, you are very clearly nudged to consume and purchase supplements. They're all supplements in the kind of foreground and the background of that petrol station, essentially responding to our cognitive biases. In particular here would be like a heuristic availability bias, in that, well, they're all here, they're all exposed, and kind of the idea there being, well, clearly I need them because they're all here on display for me to purchase. And the challenge there sometimes is with those easy access point of sales, sometimes a kind of an automatic decision to purchase can occur without really a true understanding of the need for those supplements. So we are within that choice architecture now that we find ourselves exposed to. There are constant nudges in the environment that we don't even think about, but we are exposed to on a daily basis. So here's a petrol station, and perhaps you also have got petrol stations where these supplements are now on every shelf that you also observe. If we then move from the settings and take a look then to sectors as part of that social ecological model. So the sector being the IPED industry, and it's a growing industry where there's huge amounts of money involved in that industry as well, and a growing industry contribution. Just a simple Google search brings up so many different companies and organizations that are selling various products. And just a few examples are on the slide in front of you. Now, on the face of it, those industries, those organizations, they look pretty legit. And actually, to a consumer who may not understand some of the risks and I guess the lack of quality within the industry, they may take that really nice clinical looking pharmaceutical grade organization and think that those products are going to be fine. But what we see on this screen is the reality of some of the underground steroid labs that are being exposed. And there's lots of interactions between sectors, whether that's law enforcement agencies, border control, national anti-doping organizations working together to address a growing concern around the illicit drugs market. And here is an example on the left-hand side there of some underground labs where steroids were being produced, and a screenshot from one of the National Crime Agency investigations that led to identification in the UK of a supply and trafficking team that essentially had brought 42 tons of illicit anabolic steroids into the UK. And the connection there is important in that supply chain was also then coming through into the gym and fitness network. And that was evident in the case. And actually the research is identifying the connection between the supply chain and issues of trafficking with the being embedded within the gym and bodybuilding scene. So again, that interaction between settings and sectors is a very important one when it comes to IPED use behaviour. If we then go back to some of the points I'd raised around the supplement risks, there is growing concern as well around there's a growing market for supplements and has been for quite some time, and increasingly the identification of adulteration and contamination within that industry as well. This is a publication from Peter Cohen on one of the stimulant sources within supplements, where they tested 24 supplements and none of those supplements had actually been accurately labelled. So the consumer will rely on the supplement labels to try and understand what is within those supplements, but is being misled in some cases by some manufacturers and suppliers. So product consumer behaviour is a challenging one, and it's a field where there is clearly a concern around the regulatory framework of that industry. But we've also got within the industry of nutritional supplement use this concept around the power of persuasion and the power of social proof within the decisions to use or not supplements. And we've certainly found that the internet is a go-to place for information around supplement use. Unfortunately, the vast majority are not seeking advice from qualified dietitians and nutritionists. Instead, it's what you see here on the internet. And just some examples there of this wisdom of the crowds. There's lots of almost like star ratings around the efficacy of products. And we've certainly found in our research people saying that that's where they go to. They look what's said online, what the reviews are, and if it fits all 5 stars, then they'll go ahead and purchase it. If you'd have looked at just that site, you wouldn't have also seen some of the reviews that said that this product can lead to diarrhea and abdominal discomfort, etc. So we've got to be mindful of that wisdom of the crowds and the social proof that drives some of our decisions and behaviours. So within the FAIR project that I was involved in, that issue of labelling and the issue of essentially uneducated consumers really came through from the experts that we interviewed. And it's something that is going to need tackling as we move forward in terms of raising awareness of the concerns being shared by the industry. But what do we do about that? And clearly a collective action is necessary across sectors and organisations. So just to conclude, to address harmful image and performance enhancing drug use, I hope some of the ideas presented today and by others is starting to make people aware that we do need to take action on the dopogenic environment, those sectors, settings and networks to enable individual behaviour change. It's not just a case of individual agency and individual responsibility. That changes at sector and setting level can affect social and cultural norms and values over time. And a comprehensive whole system strategy therefore enables collective responsibility for this population health threat. It's not just about public health officials that have a responsibility to take action here. There are multiple sectors that are capable and able to make some positive changes. And therefore this whole system approach requires effective behavioural, environmental, social and system interventions. So sadly, there is no quick fix, there is no simple solution and one size fits all, but there is the potential if more people work together to address the potential harms that arise from IPED use. So thank you very much for listening and for your time today. Always happy to chat this further, and if anyone's got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.